Hi, my name is Yulia, and this is the News Brief. Here we catch up with several expertly tailored stories twice a week that I pick out, and then we discuss them together in the comments, so you don't have to suffer alone, and I don't have to suffer alone. Also, as per usual, please leave your questions, suggestions, and constructive criticism, because I love reading it, and it helps me greatly. Boy, do we have a lot of news today, and some of them include Shahed drones using AI to terrorize the skies over Ukraine, Western leaders discussing nuclear retaliation and stepping up, and of course, there is not a news segment without Russia, who is basically deceiving Yemenis into fighting its war. Let's go. Cleanup efforts are underway after the nighttime strike on Zaporizhzhia. The attack damaged 15 houses and several non-residential buildings. Windows and balconies in 4 high-rise buildings were shattered, and roofs in 11 private houses were damaged. We also have an update on the consequences of the Russian strike on the center of Harkiv. The number of victims in the city has increased to 19, and the impact also damaged 41 houses, according to Mayor Terechov. The number of victims in Odessa has risen to 10, with 5 people rescued, the state emergency service reported. The Russian attack damaged a non-operational bank administrative building, 8 residential buildings, and 8 cars. And of course, everybody has heard about the intercontinental ballistic missile attack, or an intermediate-range ballistic missile attack on Dnipro last week. So in the aftermath of that, President Volodymyr Zelensky confirmed that Ukraine is in talks with allies about acquiring air defense systems capable of intercepting intercontinental ballistic missiles. Today, we gathered more details about the new missile Russia used to strike Dnipro, and we will share all the information with journalists and international media. The world must understand that Russia is the only one rejecting peace, and that's why it continues to escalate. I thank all the partners who have already responded to this latest act of Russian madness, but words are not enough. We need action. Following my instructions, Ukraine's defense minister is already meeting with our partners to secure advanced air defense systems that can protect lives from these threats, Zelensky stated. So interestingly, the American media blew up in accusations of Joe Biden for starting World War III by allowing Ukraine to deep strike Russia deeper into Russian territory. And of course, everyone is talking about how Russia used a nuclear-capable missile in Ukraine and that it's, of course, nuclear escalation and we're all going to die. I've got good or bad news for you guys. Russia has been using weapons that are nuclear capable in Ukraine for the past 2.5 years, and you're focusing on the wrong part of this sentiment. The sentiment that Russia was trying to bring to the front is that this is an intermediate range missile that is capable of striking Europe. So they were trying to show power to Europe. Russia has been doing similar things for the past 2.5 years, and this is nothing new. This is not the first time a nuclear capable weapon was being used. And if we looked into Russia's constitution, then technically Zaporizhzhia and Kherson and Donetsk and Luhansk are all equal regions of Russia that are equal to Kursk or Bryansk or Moscow. And Ukraine has been striking those regions for also the past 2.5 years. And for some reason, Russia hasn't been upset about it at all. And now that it's Kursk, they're upset because that's the real territory of Russia. And that answers all of your questions about how Russia is rescuing Russian speakers and what its objectives in Ukraine really are. But that's besides the point for now. Russia was trying to show power. And Russia was trying to show power to scare you into panic mode and into freaking out. Congrats, they've succeeded. You're in panic and you're freaking out. Now stop it. The media reveals wreckage of Oreshnik missile used in Dnipro attack. Ukrainian media showcased the remains of the Oreshnik missile that struck Dnipro. SBU experts confirmed it was launched from Russia's Kapustin Yar test site in the Astrakhan region. Key details about the missile include payload, 6 warheads, each carrying 6 submunitions. Maximum speed. Flight time, 15 minutes to the target. Maximum speed, Mach 11. The discovery sheds further light on Russia's use of advanced experimental weapons in its ongoing strikes. And the only good thing that came out of this missile strike in Dnipro, not that there is anything good about that at all, but I am just trying to be a little more cheerful. The White House has officially confirmed for the first time that restrictions on Ukrainian airstrikes on Russian territory using ATACMS missiles have been lifted. At this moment, the Ukrainians have the ability to use ATACMS for self-defense in cases of urgent need, and clearly that is what we're seeing in and around Kursk and Kursk region, White House Strategic Communications Coordinator John Kirby stated during a briefing. If you're thinking to yourself, this is not news because we have already heard that, no, it is news because what we've heard before is that there are limited targets that Ukraine was able to strike in Russia, and most of them were near the border. And what hasn't been confirmed until today is that Ukraine was able to pick and choose their own targets and strike targets deep within Russia outside of Kursk, Bryansk, or any other border region. So this is news. Russia is integrating artificial intelligence into Shahed drones to create swarms capable of coordinating attacks to overwhelm Ukrainian air defenses, The Guardian reports. On Thursday, as we've already said a million times, Russia used an Oreshnik medium-range ballistic missile for the first time targeting Dnipro. The attack drew global attention, and on Sunday, Volodymyr Zelensky highlighted the rising number of strikes by Shahed drones. Actually, I would like to confirm that the air raid in Kyiv yesterday lasted for 5.5 hours for the first time in, I want to say, a year and a half. It was such a long air raid, and it was one day, and it was the past 24 hours where there has been not a single time that there hasn't been a Shahed drone in the air over Ukraine at all. And it's just been, I've just been hearing rounds of mortar all the time, taking down drones or hunting for drones. It's been a very, very different type of feeling during an air raid for Shahed drones, because there are a lot more of them, they're a lot more frequent, and they're just nonstop. The Ukrainian president stated that 50 out of the 73 drones launched on Sunday were intercepted. In the previous week, Russia had launched a total of 460 Iranian-made drones into Ukrainian airspace. Ukraine is not a weapons testing ground. Ukraine is a sovereign and independent state, but Russia continues its efforts to kill our people, sow fear and panic, and weaken us, Zelensky said in a statement on Sunday morning. Ukraine reports that Russia has established 2 factories to produce the Shahed 136 Delta wing drones, known in Moscow as Geran-2, in Tatarstan, about 1,600 kilometers from the Ukrainian border. According to a government source in Kyiv, production is running at hundreds per week. Those drones are often deployed as soon as they're ready. While easier to shoot down or neutralize than high-speed missiles, they tie up Ukraine's defenses and can inflict significant damage with their 50-kilogram warheads when they reach their targets. Russia is continually modifying its drones to make them more lethal. Earlier this month, the Ukrainian military released footage of a thermobaric warhead, which produces a fiery explosion with temperatures reaching approximately 2,000 degrees Celsius. Such warheads are particularly devastating when detonated inside buildings. Ukrainian military sources suggest that Russia is working to integrate artificial intelligence into its drones to create swarms. Those swarms would allow the Shaheds to communicate and coordinate attacks more effectively, potentially overwhelming air defenses. However, the effectiveness of this technology remains unclear. Zelensky emphasized Ukraine's need for additional air defense systems to counter these growing threats. We are working with our partners on this. Strengthening the protection of our skies is extremely important, he said. Meanwhile, Ukrainian specialists are developing cost-effective FPV drones priced under $1,000 to intercept Shaheds. However, their efforts face challenges as the turbulent airflow generated by the Shahed in flight significantly disrupts the smaller FPV drones' navigation. There are a lot of things that Ukraine needs to work on because, again, while we have great air defense and while we are capable of intercepting most missiles, and we have been doing a fantastic job at that in Ukraine, the further into this war, the more creative Russia gets. And again, Shahed drones are easier to intercept because they're not high speed, they're drones, and you can intercept them with mortar fire, not with expensive air defense missiles. But at the same time, there could be 70 to 150 of them in the air at one time. And you know what? That is difficult to intercept because imagine there is one mortar gunman trying to take down all of these drones and there are so many of them in the air. So on the one hand, they're easier to intercept. On the other hand, they're not, because they create swarms and they overwhelm air defense. And now moving on to news worldwide, where actually we have a lot to talk about today, because it looks like Europe is finally waking up after a lot of shaking and after, a reality check with an intermediate range ballistic missile. And there are a lot of nuclear retaliation talks. So let's find out. The U.S. Department of Defense has announced updates to its nuclear deterrence strategy. Oh, look at that, almost like the updates to the nuclear doctrine that Putin made. As part of the changes, the readiness of Ohio-class strategic nuclear submarines equipped with Trident II intercontinental ballistic missiles has been enhanced. American experts on Moscow's nuclear blackmail say nuclear weapons won't benefit Russia. And of course, we all know that. And I mean, before I read you the next article, I really do want to say that the likes of Joe Rogan, who are nuclear warmongering and spreading Putin's narratives, are really just doing that, nuclear warmongering. Russia is not going to use nukes. This is not good for Russia. This is not good for anyone. This is literally suicide for Russia. And whether you believe that Russia is scared of the US or not scared of the US has a little bit, but still but still more nuclear weapons than Russia, and they're way better quality than Russian. And Russia does know that once it launches nuclear weapons, the US is going to respond. And we know that based on the fact that Russia notified the US that they were launching the ICBM or IRBM at Dnipro the other week, 30 minutes before it happened, because they were scared that the US is going to think that this missile has nuclear warheads on it and react. So yeah, please put away Joe Rogan, maybe unsubscribe from his podcast, and podcasts of all of the far-right people who are trying to tell you that Russia is in the right and Ukraine attacked first. Meanwhile, Ukraine has been attacked for the past 2.5 years, and this is just the first time they're hearing about nuclear-capable weapons being launched. Doesn't mean that they haven't been launched, but anyways, I digress. Point is, these people are trying to convince you that Russia is in the right for having attacked a sovereign country and Ukraine is in the wrong for defending itself, and that the West is the one provoking World War III, not Russia, who actually is crossing everyone's red lines every day. Anyways, monitoring Russia's nuclear readiness remains a top priority for U.S. intelligence, says Matthew Bunn, a nuclear weapons analyst and former science advisor to President Bill Clinton. As far as we know, Russian nuclear forces are in a state of readiness. It would be unwise for the United States to dismiss the possibility of Russia using nuclear weapons if it chooses to, Bunn told Voice of America. According to Bunn, the last significant U.S. intelligence concern about a Russian nuclear strike occurred in late 2022 after Ukraine's successful counteroffensive in Harkiv and Kherson. He notes that a serious threat to Crimea might prompt Russia to consider nuclear options. John Erath, senior policy director at the Center for Arms Control and Non-Proliferation, argues that Russia is unlikely to use nuclear weapons. Over the past 2 years, numerous red lines for their use have been crossed, including Ukraine receiving Western tanks, Patriot systems, and F-16 fighters. And I also want to add that Ukraine did invade the territory of Russia, Kursk. Ukraine had drones flying in Moscow, which, I mean, not at residential targets, obviously, but at ammo storage facilities. And, of course, Ukraine has done numerous things in Crimea, including destroying most of Russia's air defenses and striking the Kerch Bridge multiple times. All of the things that were going to cause Russia to use nukes. The other thing is, if Russia is going to use nukes, it's going to be tactical nukes, and they're going to be used on Ukraine, not on Europe, and not on the United States. And the third point to that is, Ukrainians would be the people who would suffer from tactical nukes, not anyone else. And Russians would also have nuclear fallout from that. And to conclude all of this, the US would intervene. And for Russia, that would be the death of it. No nukes are going to be used. And if they're going to be used, then we're going to be the ones to reap the consequences, not you. And I guess we're ready for it. Lack of moral constraints, but no tactical benefit. Erath highlights that Russia has used various types of weaponry in its war against Ukraine without red lines. The absence of nuclear use, he suggests, is not due to moral reservations, but because such weapons offer no tangible advantage. In reality, Russia has no moral constraints against using nuclear weapons in Ukraine, yet they have refrained because these weapons won't benefit them. Nuclear blackmail as a tactic. Experts stress that Russia's nuclear threats aim to intimidate Ukraine and the West into halting support for Ukraine and accepting Russian terms for a ceasefire. Yep, exactly. This is all a show of power. Diplomacy and continued support for Ukraine, despite the heightened risk of nuclear conflict, the highest since the 1962 Cuban Missile Crisis, according to Bunn, experts emphasize the importance of diplomacy. John Erath notes the historical reduction of nuclear arsenals by 80% during the Cold War, but acknowledges that further disarmament is unlikely in the current tense climate. Yeah, especially when former American generals are talking about how, boots on the ground would be in Russia if they weren't a nuclear country. That's really not a very good incentive for nuclear non-proliferation or disarmament. John Hardy, a security expert from the Foundation of Defense of Democracies, urges the West to continue supporting Ukraine, including lifting restrictions on Western missiles targeting Russian territory. And the last point is a growing threat. The potential expiration of the New START treaty in 2026, the last remaining agreement on nuclear arms reduction, adds to concerns about a renewed nuclear arms race. Well, I mean, the nuclear arms race is obviously going to happen because everybody in the world at this point has realized, because of NATO's inaction, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy and something they did to themselves, that if you have nukes, everything goes. So if they want to say that anyone is to blame for how Russia is behaving, it's really the West for not showing Russia what they should be scared of. Losing Ukraine poses a greater threat than Russia's nuclear blackmail, said Democratic Congressman Mike Quigley. And I just wanted to put it out here because I really do agree with him. It's not even about Ukraine winning. It's about Russia losing, because Ukraine poses no threat to anyone, and Russia wants to change the world order and dominate it. And speaking of the EU, this Politico cover has evidently changed a lot in how EU leaders approach dealing with Russia these days. I'm kidding. Obviously, this Politico cover had nothing to do with it, even though it is very fitting. But here are some narratives that have really been changing in the EU, and the EU, guys, is stepping up. And of course, it's because Trump won the presidency, and also because Russia is just getting as brazen as one can. But this is great news, and I'm happy to see that. German Defense Minister Boris Pistorius stated that Putin's invasion of Ukraine has escalated beyond a regional war. Thank you. Finally, someone has said that. Pistorius believes Putin sees himself as victorious in the war and aims to continue fighting to establish a new world order. He noted that Russia has completely mobilized its economy for war, producing as much weaponry and ammunition in 3 months as the entire EU does in a year, Spiegel reports. Given the persistent threat from Moscow, Pistorius emphasized the need for significant investments in Germany's military readiness. Our security is a fragile commodity. It's almost like Ukrainians have been saying this since the very beginning, that it's not a regional conflict. It's going to grow beyond the regional conflict if you guys are not going to actually do something about it, because it's not a local conflict. He doesn't just want Ukraine. He wants a new world order, which means it's a world war, not a war for territory. It's a war of ideologies, which makes it a world war. Anyways, interesting how Ukrainians can be screaming about it for 2.5 years and no one listens to us, but the second that a European leader says something, now it has merit to it. Anyways, better late than never, though. European countries have resumed discussions on the possible deployment of troops to Ukraine, according to Le Monde. As the war in Ukraine escalates, Western nations have reopened discussions about deploying troops and private defense companies to Ukraine. These sensitive talks, most of which are classified, have gained urgency amid concerns about the potential withdrawal of U.S. support from Kyiv if Donald Trump assumes the U.S. presidency on January 20th, 2025. The debate, initially proposed by French President Emmanuel Macron during a February meeting in Paris, faced strong opposition from several European nations, led by Germany. However, the idea has not been shelved. According to Le Monde, it has gained renewed momentum in recent weeks, particularly following British Prime Minister Keir Starmer's visit to France during the November 11th celebrations. Negotiations are underway between Great Britain and France on defense cooperation, aimed at forming a strong coalition of European allies with a focus on Ukraine and broader European security, a British military source told Le Monde. And Keir Starmer has actually been doing some fantastic advocacy work for Ukraine in the past couple of months, and he has been really changing some minds and really influencing some decisions. So thank you, Sir Keir. Here's the thing. I can't comment on whether these troops should be in Ukraine or shouldn't be in Ukraine. That's not up to me, and I don't think it's up to journalists. It's actually up to military experts. But what I can comment on is that it's about time that everybody started talking about it, and usually when discussions are not shelved or nixed immediately, it will just take time before it actually happens, so be prepared. And that means that we've stretched defenses out so far that now European military might need to partake in this war. And I don't want to say we told you so in Ukraine, but we told you so. Here is how we arrive at Russia. Russia's shooting list, prepared in case of Ukraine's occupation, targeted teachers, veterans, journalists, priests, and other prominent figures, according to Lieutenant General Kirill Budanov, head of Ukraine's HUR. The list included teachers of Ukrainian language, literature, and history, ATO veterans, journalists, scientists, writers, priests of the Orthodox Church of Ukraine, and other supportive denominations, public and political figures, and heads of state and local government bodies, Budanov revealed. He also stated that prior to the full-scale invasion, Russian forces were given instructions on where to locate mass graves. Yeah, Russia was trying to liberate Russian speakers in Ukraine. That's why it wanted to kill teachers of the Ukrainian language and, local government heads and local government heads and, just random people that are pro-Ukrainian and that are contributing highly to society, culture, and education. Right. All to save Russian speakers. 95% of released Ukrainian defenders were tortured in Russian captivity, according to Andriy Yusov, HUR representative. Andriy Yusov, a representative of Ukraine's Defense Intelligence, HUR, stated that nearly all Ukrainian defenders released from Russian captivity experienced torture. According to Yusov, Russia has established a systematic approach to violating prisoners' rights. Torture was not primarily used to extract information, but to crush resistance, destroy personalities, and humiliate dignity. Specialized personnel are reportedly trained for this purpose. And I mean, I will add from myself that a lot of my friends that have left Russian captivity, and I know quite a few people who have been to Russian captivity, all say the same thing, is that really they're not asking for information. It's not like they're interested in anything. It's just that they want to torture you, to humiliate you, to break your spirit. So when you come back to Ukraine, if you ever do, you're a shell of a human being and you're useless and there is no reason for you to live. But Ukrainian defenders are so brave that a lot of them, I don't want to say most of them because, I don't want to discount mental health struggles that people are going through, but a lot of people do tend to prevail, and a lot of people come back and they're really brave and they're fighting and they're, and they're living their life and they're happy to be home and they're persevering no matter what. He criticized the lack of enforcement of the Geneva Conventions, noting that monitoring organizations like the International Committee of the Red Cross have been largely ineffective. Useless, I would say. Just ask any Azov prisoner of war who was extracted from Azovstal. Russia, he said, hinders the ICRC's access to detention facilities and exchanges while the organization's response remains insufficiently proactive. Since the full-scale invasion began, there have been 58 prisoner exchanges, allowing nearly 4,000 Ukrainians to return home. However, Yusuf emphasized that thousands remain in captivity, including both military personnel and civilians, and urged continued efforts to secure their release. And last, but certainly not least, and the only story in this section that does not involve torturing of Ukrainians, belittling of Ukrainians, or plans of murdering Ukrainians. Well, actually, plans of murdering Ukrainians always are involved when we talk about Russia. But for this one, I feel like we need to have circus music in the background because kind of funny. Russia allegedly deceives hundreds of Yemenis into fighting in Ukraine. The Financial Times reports that Yemeni citizens were recruited under false pretenses, brought to Russia, and forcibly enlisted into the military to fight in Ukraine. I've heard that somewhere already. Like India? Didn't that happen to India? What, you want to tell me that North Koreans watching porn on the front lines because they have never had open access to internet is not enough? You need Yemenis? You need other nationalities? Huh, who would have thought? A document dated July 3rd, signed by the head of the recruitment center in Nizhny Novgorod, may serve as evidence of the alleged contract. The report claims at least 200 Yemenis were recruited in this manner. The recruitment is believed to have been facilitated by the Houthis, who are reportedly seeking to strengthen ties with Moscow. Yeah, of course, Russia is hiring people from Yemen. Russia is hiring. We've seen this happening in a lot of different countries. And Russia always goes for disadvantaged countries because, of course, they think that they can get away with it. They can just take these people as cannon fodder, offer them a lot of money, and offer them a job far away from the front lines. Then they come to Russia, they sign the contract. Suddenly there is no money, and they're thrown into the meat grinder. So yeah, I guess that's what you get for trusting Russia. And I guess that's what you get for being buddy-buddy with Russia. And on that note, that's all I have for you for today. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like this video and send it to a friend because, well, hey, are they watching the news? Are you sure they're keeping up? I'm watching you. Send it to a friend so they can keep up. Just kidding. I'm not going to be enforcing it. I will. But anyways, yes, send it to a friend, give this video a like, and also subscribe to this channel and turn on notifications so you can be notified when my pretty face shows up on air again and you can get the news. Also, do leave your comments, questions, and suggestions because, as I always say, as you know, I might not interact with them as in respond, but I always read them and they help me tailor next episodes to your needs and curiosities. See you next time.